Good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing? Awesome, awesome. So we are here for our next panel, which is called Black Manhattan In and Out, the Archives. Please welcome to the stage our moderator for this evening, Eric K. Washington, author of Boss of the Grips, The Life of James H. Williams and the Red Caps of Grand Central Terminal. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 4th Annual Schomburg Center Literary Festival, honoring the rebellious, joy-filled privilege and necessity of reading. I'm Eric K. Washington. I thank you all for coming, and I thank the Schomburg for inviting me to moderate today's panel. It was thanks to the Schomburg's indispensable archives and others that I was able to trail the subject of my biography, Boss of the Grips, The Life of James H. Williams and the Red Caps of Grand Central Terminal, beyond the marble halls of that august railroad station to the grittier streetscapes of the Tenderloin, Hell's Kitchen, Harlem, and other African-American footholds on the island of Manhattan. Black Manhattan In and Out of the Archives is our panel's title. It unwittingly, yet aptly, evokes James Weldon Johnson's 1930 masterwork, Black Manhattan. In that survey, Johnson wrote that Harlem appears at a thoughtless glance to be the climax of the incongruous. But the seeming incongruity and wonder of this black metropolis in the heart of the great Western white metropolis grows less and less and disappears as we glance backward from Harlem and become familiar with the story of the Negro in the city and the state of New York. Our two panelists this afternoon, a novelist and a biographer, have ably piloted our glances backwards. Using exhaustive research, both have bared Black Manhattan's complex historical backstory, often yielding lessons for us today. Kia Cawthron is both an award-winning playwright and fiction writer. Her 2016 debut book, The Castle Crossed the Magnet Carter, was a historical novel set in Alabama. But it is her recent book in 2021, Moon and the Mars, that sweeps us into an epic coming-of-age journey of Theo, a young girl of mixed African and Irish ancestry, whose Civil War-era adolescence awakens through such 19th century place names as Five Points, Seneca Village, and Little Africa, enclaves that once pinpointed Manhattan's black presence. Kevin Magruder is Associate Professor of History at Antioch College in Ohio. But here in New York, his long career in community development has included executive directorships with Harlem's Abyssinian Development Corporation and Gay Men of African Descent. His book, Race and Real Estate, Conflict and Cooperation in Harlem, 1890 to 1920, gave birth to his recent 2021 book, the biography Philip Payton, the Father of Black Harlem. Kia and Kevin will each read a short selection from their respective books, followed by some conversation, and it will leave us time for some of your questions to the authors. Kia and Kevin?
Hello. This is my book, Moon and the Mars, and it does take place in New York City, leading into the Civil War, and the main character is a child, a girl of Irish and African American heritage. She's an orphan who lives between the tenement apartments of her Black and Irish grandmothers. And it's in Five Points, which was the most impoverished district of Manhattan. There was a lot of intersection between Irish and Black communities. It's actually now where the court buildings are downtown. So I'm gonna read a little excerpt from her with her Black family. This is 1858, and Theo, who's the main character, is 8.5 years old. And she's with Miriam, who was a woman who escaped slavery and has been posing as Theo's aunt, and she's been recently married. I gots to go out little while. You help me? I love helping Auntie Miriam. She opened a big jar of the concoction, almond oil, shea butter, beeswax. While I spread the liniment over her left arm and hand and back of her neck, she stared into her little round looking glass set on the table, applying it to her cheeks and chin and forehead and eyelids. Auntie Miriam looked funny, light skin her face and neck and hands, and dark everywhere else. But face and neck and hands, the only parts shows when she out and about, so them's the only places she needs the potion. Here's what I reckon. Auntie Miriam remember Miss Sally, colored boarder who make herself light and pretty for the gentlemen, and Auntie Miriam want to be with the fashion. Auntie Miriam, Africa at home, mulatto in the street. Come back later that evening, Auntie Miriam take to her rocking chair, light her smoke, waiting for Mr. Samuel. I never seen Auntie Miriam smoke before, but now she enjoy her pipe like she was born to it. I help wash the dishes, Auntie Miriam. I gets to 'em directly. She puff, eyes in the dark out the window. Wonder why she prolonging a chore. Then I know she don't want to stick her hands in no water yet. Now you really look like my auntie, Auntie Miriam. She turned to me, eyebrows a question. Or my mother, I giggle, except my mother was Irish, she couldn't look like her. Auntie Miriam's eyes stuck on me. I chuckle, but my laugh is starting to lose air. Both us pretty, light. Her puffin' stop, eyes narrow. You know why I do this, Theo. I stare. Auntie Miriam never stirred to me like that before. I nod. Then why you natter on? I don't know what answer I'm supposed to give to that. She sigh, back to her rockin', eyes back to the window. Me and the crickets wait. I'm a homebody, likes my walls around me. But sometime gots to show my face in the world, the odd errand. Now Auntie Miriam looked to the looking glass, staring at her fair cheeks. No smile. She speaks soft, like more talking to the mirror than to me. No kidnapping me back whipping chains. South Carolina ain't never finding their dark-skinned Lizzie. Not on the street, no how. Then we both quiet till my yawns sneak up and bellow. In my dream, I'm walking down Broadway with Auntie Miriam, and here come the slave catchers. Then I see Auntie Miriam forgot to put on her light-skinned disguise. Scared for her, you seen, Lizzie, one of them say. I shake my head, no, but surely they see my heart pound through my chest. Then Auntie Miriam beside me takes a laughing, hold her belly rolling on the ground. The funniest joke. I start to smile, then feel my water. Wake up, slip outside to the privy. Walk back when I'm done. On the stoops, a pail of water for clean and dirty feet. Rub them till they glisten, then step inside. A murmur from the other bed closet. Mr. Samuel must have come home while I was emptying myself. Creep back to my room, notice the other door ajar. Mr. Samuel washing the light skin off Auntie Miriam. Chimney sweeping, Mr. Samuel always carry the soot filth, but now washed, him darker in me, but lighter in his wife. And on the bed they sit together, her face already clean brown. Now he work her arms. He do it soft, his skin moving slow against hers. Faces close to each other, eyes warm at each other, and where he washed off the light lotion and her brown flesh peeking through, he kisses, his lips against her clean, soft elbow, brown, soft lower arm, muscle and fat, slow and mellow, her shining deep, dark brown skin, delicate and strong. and the gentle and the tender and the smiling get to feeling so much like something private, like something ought to only be between man and wife, that I get the blush and scurry quiet back to my own room. Good night.
Philip Payton was born in 1876 in Westfield, Massachusetts. He was born in a family of entrepreneurs. His father was a barber. His mother was a hair care artist, and they had a building on the main street, one of the main streets in Westfield, which was a town at that time of about probably 5,000 to 10,000 people. It was on one of the main streets. And so he grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. In that family, he was considered an underachiever. And he dropped out of school because of a football injury, began working in his father's barbershop, which his parents really did not want him to do. They had greater plans for him. And after a couple of years, he decided in April of 1899 to come to New York and make his fortune. His parents didn't want him to do that either. They had lived in New York in the 1870s, and they probably knew something about the challenges of a young man being in New York. But he came anyway. He struggled for about a year, and then he landed on his feet. He got a porter's job, went back home to Westfield during Labor Day, came back, and the job was gone. He was ashamed to go back to Westfield, a failure, and so he decided to stay in New York, and through some connections with friends, got another porter's job in the office of a man who was developing the Upper West Side. And that's where he got the idea of going into real estate. In 1900, he entered a partnership with who I believe was a childhood friend from Springfield, Albert Brown. And they opened an office in what was in the Tenderloin. That's what's now a midtown area on the west side. And they struggled there. His friend abandoned the partnership, and Payton soldiered on. He eventually, his luck broke his way, and in 1900, he got several deals. By 1902, he had purchased a brownstone on 131st Street between Lenox and Fifth Avenue. And then in 1903, he formed a company called the Afro-American Realty Company. And that's the name that he's associated with. And he was in his mid-20s at that time. His partners were African-American entrepreneurs who were older than him. If you look at the cover of the book, that green section, it's a picture of the library that is right next door to the Schomburg, the old library. And I didn't talk with the book designer about it, but this area was ground zero for Philip Payton. The block where Lenox Terrace is used to be walk-up building blocks, 135th, 134th, 133rd. They were mainly 4-story walk-ups. By 1900, the occupants were black and white, some in the same building, some at different parts of the street. Payton formed that company and began to specialize in what he called colored tenements. In 1904, another bigger company bought a lot of those buildings. When you look at maps, Kia mentioned, I think, or Eric mentioned Little Africa. That's what that area was called on maps at that time. In 1904, the Hudson Realty Group bought a lot of those properties and served eviction notices on the residents. And Peyton joined with investors to rally against that. And they countered that by getting leases from other buildings in that area. He realized he needed to do more than a partnership, and so he incorporated the Afro-American Realty Company. And that's really when he comes onto both the local and the national stage. And I'm kind of giving you all that because I'm going to read a section where he's talking about what the Afro-American Realty is going to be doing. Excuse me. And I'm reading from the prospectus of the Afro-American Realty Company. The text explained, Negro colonization to be done away with. In the midst of hardening residential segregation practices in New York City, the pamphlet suggested, quote, the idea that Negroes must be confined to certain localities can be done away with. The idea that it is not practical to put colored and white tenants together in the same house can be done away with. The prospectus explained the cause of racial segregation and the comparative advantage of the Afro-American Realty Company. Quote, the reason for the present condition of the colored tenancy in New York City today is because of the race prejudice of the white owner and his white agent. When the owner becomes colored and his agent colored, then there is compelled to come an improvement of the condition. The text then linked the mission of the company to the profit motive. Prejudice, so far as it relates to the Negro tenancy in New York City, will in time become so very expensive that it will become impracticable. And like all impracticable things, will die a natural death. A respectable, law-abiding Negro will find conditions can be so changed that he will be able to rent wherever his means will permit him to live. Promising returns of investment of 7 to 10% in one of the closing sections of the text, it made clear that the Afro-American Realty Company was a race enterprise, a business owned by Black people designed to serve Black customers. An earnest appeal is hereby made to the colored people of this country to unite for our mutual benefit and protection. The Negro is being gradually crowded out of all lines and is pursued by a relentless race prejudice. It remains for him alone to stop this. Judging from the rapidity with which the balance of the unsold stock of the company is being taken by our people, we can but say our appeal is being answered, and the colored people are awake to the needs of the situation. The Colored American magazine noted that not a white person is connected with the company in any capacity. Even the typewriter keys are being manipulated by colored ladies who are very businesslike and obliging. The company is devoted to the cause of African ownership and Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you both. This is actually a question for both of you, and you're writing about different periods of Manhattan history. What were the chief stakes for Black Manhattanites in the periods that you were each immersed in? Maybe Kia. And I'm thinking, for example, were the stakes like residential, employment, social, or maybe all of the above? Or that would presented particular challenges for you doing research and writing?
Well, yeah, all of the above. But I don't think there were definitely places like Little Africa where sometimes there were congregations of Black people, but it wasn't as much, in some ways not as much today. There was, at that time in the middle of the 19th century, there were sometimes the same building could be some Black and others, and especially when writing about Irish, because they were sort of of whites the bottom rung, and so that's why there was a lot of interaction. There was also an interesting thing in terms of jobs, which caused some tension because some jobs live in domestic that Black people had done was now being replaced by Irish immigrants, or big things that blew up were longshoremen that were Black jobs that were replaced by Irish immigrants. And there was one job that I'll just say that was interesting, cigar rollers, because there were a lot of cigar companies in Manhattan and Brooklyn, which were two different cities then. And that was a place that there was tension because Black men tended to be paid the most above white workers. Partly because some had learned it from plantation or it was passed down, and so they were the most skilled. And so, yeah.
I would say, well, one of the things, there's a through line there. So that prospectus talked about lines of work that they were being pushed out of. That's 1904. So what you're describing from that Civil War period is continuing into this period. And the backdrop is that the fluid racial residential patterns are hardening by 1904. And that section that I read in terms of the Black people, it wasn't a lot. It was just those blocks primarily. Other than that, it was servants. Peyton was the only person on 131st Street, he and his wife and their Black servant, when he purchased that building. And so I would argue that if that eviction, and I still can't definitively say if the people who were evicted actually left, but if Peyton hadn't countered it, that would have led to a different Harlem in terms of Black people. Because what Peyton did is like a chess game. He blocked them. They had purchased where Harlem Hospital is. They had purchased all that Lenox Avenue side and all the 135th Street side on the north side. He bought property, and they were planning to buy more because that subway stop there was scheduled to open in October. This is the spring. And so they were buying because they wanted to redevelop that for higher and better use. If he hadn't blocked them, that would have happened. And I can't say Black people would never have moved to Harlem, but they wouldn't have moved then. And if they didn't move then, let's say they moved during World War I, right. They wouldn't have been anchored enough to create a Harlem Renaissance. Yeah. Because what they do when they get anchored in 1904 is they create institutions, there's social networks, newspapers, and so the timing, the chronology of Black people in Harlem, I think would have been different. Peyton was a marketing genius, and he marketed Harlem to Black people even when there were very few of us here. And he wouldn't have been able to do that. There would have been no credibility if he hadn't had that victory there.
And clearly for the period that you're working in, Kevin, while all of these things, employment and social interests, where a person can live, those are high stakes because there were these limitations. I'm always curious, how long did it take, given the research and the writing, to write your book?
Well, I started it at the top of 2017, but partly because I'm also a playwright, so it's sort of like balancing two things. Right. I had these playwriting things to do. So I really wrote in earnest from the summer of 2018 to the spring of 2020. Okay. So, yeah.
It's a more difficult question for me. I wanted Peyton to be my dissertation when I was at City University of New York. And I started there in 2001. My advisor said, there's not enough here to do that. And so my race and real estate book, which preceded that, was a reworking of my dissertation. And in doing that book, I found a lot more about Peyton. And so that's what I was able to use to begin. And so that book came out in 2015, and probably 2015 is when I started kind of in earnest bringing all the things I had together in Peyton.
I get that begs a question for me. What sources did you use to find Peyton's voice? Because this is always, particularly if you're doing a biography, but as well for fiction, finding a voice that you can use. So, what?
He was in the newspaper all the time. He was very close. He was friends Actually, Fred Moore, who was the editor of the publisher of the New York Age, was one of the partners in the Afro-American Realty Company. And so he was in that paper all the time, interviews, so there's his voice there. He entertained a lot at that house, so it wasn't just, it's kind of like Madame C.J. Walker and Villa Luaro, that house is more than just a house, they're using it for other things. And so the menus are in the paper, the guest lists are in the paper. He was in Booker T. Washington's inner circle because of some family connections with somebody else who was a mentee of Washington. And so Booker T. Washington, and Emmett Scott, Booker T. Washington's right-hand man, he was very close friends. And so he's in the Booker T. Washington papers. And the reason I'm looking there, because there are no Philip Payton papers that at least I've been able to find. And so there was no collection, but fortunately, he was in these different spaces. He's also in the Emmett Scott papers at Morgan State. Booker T. Washington's papers are at the Library of Congress. And he was he's a historian's dream because Washington saved everything. Emmett Scott, similarly, very diligent. And
So contextually, you can get a sense of Peyton's voice by how other people are observing him.
And people talking about
Right.
him.
I mean, I know we hear his voice in the prospectus that he wrote, but I was going to ask if were there personal papers that you. What about for you, Kia? So you're inventing a character, so you're responsible for their voice and their point of view. What kind of resources, archival resources, do you find useful?
Well, at first I was nervous because it's the middle of the 19th century. My first novel was 20th century, started the middle 20th century. So that it can, that's closer. Right? But then I thought, well, novels like, Mark Twain and things, it can read like today, of that time. So that's not too terrible. It was more that I was concerned about dialect. So I definitely did not want Miriam, the formerly enslaved person, to be a cliche. I wanted to be careful about that. I was definitely concerned about the Irish dialect because that's much more foreign to me. And I actually read a lot of stuff about sentence structure and syntax. And one little trick actually really helped me a lot, which was in the original Irish language, which was the language. It's Gaelic is a umbrella. Irish is one language under Gaelic. And they used after as a helping verb, which then they became part of English Irish. So if you wanted to say, I went to the store, you could say, I'm after going to the store. Or I just went to the store, I'm only after going to the store. So little things like that could help me to find those voices. And it took me a long time to, I was loving that research and then I had to jump in and do it, and I was nervous about it. But I had to do it and rewrite it and rewrite it, get it wrong to get it right. And so at some point, it was like, okay, I'm feeling it, so. Yeah.
And that makes me ask, I know, just by your means of finding ways of inventing the voice, archives are often chock full of recorded facts and data, but also often fall short on ambience. And where else did you contrive to locate material that engaged the five senses? What your protagonist smells, hears, is moved to dance to, or gasp at, or when the archives don't have that information, what did you use to?
I looked at fiction, The Sport of the Gods by Paul Laurence Dunbar, a novel from 1902. There's an opening paragraph that when I thought about, well, for Philip Payton moving to New York in April of 1899, what was that like? And the beginning of this paragraph is chapter 7, to the provincial coming from New York for the first time. That's how it starts. And then it goes into what that person sees. There were no bridges then, so you couldn't get in New York without getting on a ferry. It explains that. And so I kind of use that to talk about what Payton might have seen. And then the next passage talks about how that person feels. They find a place, but they're lonely and alone. So now they go back out to get into the hustle and bustle. And I don't have Payton's voice, but that's probably. And I looked at newspapers, what would he have read that next day? And I looked at the headlines, and there's all these international skirmishes, economy, things like that.
Yeah, the splash of water from the ferry boat ride. I grew up on Staten Island, but so I'm sure it felt the same in the 19th century as it does, here in the 21st. And the same for you?
Paintings actually really helped from that time, and also newspapers. So this is the middle of the 19th century, and the newspapers would say things like "word on the street" is, which you wouldn't think that was the terms back then. So, yeah, things like that, and certainly also the fiction, and all that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm supposed to be watching. How are we doing questions with them? Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you there. Are you there? Yes. Sure. We have some questions for our authors. And I can't see a thing, so I see a tall person moving, so, okay.
Thank you all so much. I'm a longtime fan of yours, Kia, so it's wonderful to be able to discover the rest of yours. I'd also like to thank our ASL interpreters for today. You've all been doing such a beautiful job. As a kind of a sidebar question, so excuse me because it doesn't directly address, but I'm particularly fascinated by perhaps how financial crisis has affected the issues that you've both written about. I've been doing some research about the 1929 crash in particular, but how the socio-political elements of advancement have been affected as they seem to be now, when as soon as people feel that there's a crisis, individual rights are suddenly threatened. Is this too broad a question? Thank you for your time.
Oh, not at all.
No, you addressed some financial panics in your novel.
Yes, definitely. There was the panic of 1857 that resulted in depression. There was as we went into the war, there was at first this war economy, and things were great, people got jobs, but then inflation went up, and so it was, terrible for the poor. And, kind of the biggest thing that happens in the novel is when the Civil War happens, and in 1863, there's a draft, and, this is the Civil War. This is about slavery, although some people wanted to pretend it wasn't. Many black people really wanted to join, but in New York they could not. Meanwhile, for white people, including Irish, there was the draft, and if you had $300, you could get out of the war. It was this commutation fee, which of course basically meant that the rich could get out of the war. And then there was this tension from, people feeling that there's black people that wanted to fight a war for slavery, people feeling they were forced to, other people, and not being able to, unless they went to Massachusetts at that time, and then poor white people feeling they were being forced to fight this war. So yes, it was huge, finances huge, yes.
And it plays a major part in Philip Payton's trajectory too. He's on an upward slope, and then there's a downturn in 1907, and everything kind of freezes up, and around the same time he is sued by some of his shareholders. The prospectus I was reading, Wilford Smith, his attorney, was also a partner, drafted that, but then also is leading the shareholders in the suit against him, so it's very messy, and he never really comes back. He keeps going, but that and the economic downturn were, really slow things down for him.
Is there another?
Yes, there is.
Start talking, I can't see, but I hear your voice.
Sorry, I'm not very tall, and I'm in a wheelchair on top.
It's okay.
Named Mary Durbany Ross here. I'm the daughter of Provost I.E. Durbany, Tuskegee University. And I was wondering why Booker T. Washington's archives were not sent to the Schomburg instead of being sent to D.C. Or if there's any way to duplicate them, why not in both places, but certainly at the Schomburg.
He died in 1915, And so I don't know when they went to the Library of Congress, but timing might have something to do with it. You know, as you know, at the time of his death, he was known as the leader of black people, and there were monuments being, built for him. And so I suspect that that's how they get to the Library of Congress. And ironically, he dies, Woodrow Wilson is president, and the nation is really entering into, kind of what Rayford Logan calls the nadir, the low point in terms of, and, I don't know the details of the Library of Congress, but even as I'm thinking about it, I wonder if that's the federal government trying to put a good face on the things that they're doing. They segregate the civil service, which had not been segregated before, and that, for black people, even as now, that was a way of good employment. But in terms of the part about copying to come to the Schomburg, it's a massive collection. But it would be great to have them here too.
Is there another question there? I can ask another question too, unless there's somebody there. I don't want to cut anybody.
Hi, I'm doing some research on Lower Manhattan, and I encountered the African Society for Mutual Relief. They were around from 1789 to about 1945. Did Philip, did he encounter that group at all?
Not that I know of.
They own real estate also.
Pardon?
They own some real estate.
Correct. There's a book called In the Company of African American Men by Craig Stephen Wilder that is a history of that organization. And I have not come across a connection with Peyton, but there are social circles that men are part, so he's part of the civic society, the equitable society, but I didn't come across a connection to that, but it was a very important organization, the African Society for Mutual Relief. But that book, In the Company of, I believe it's In the Company of Black Men by Craig Stephen Wilder, is a history of that organization.
You reminded me of something, Kevin. You referred to Little Africa,
Right.
and I know I do, and you do, Kia, in your book. And I realized, we're talking about two different places, and for people who aren't familiar, it was kind of common in different periods for any place where black folks lived, notably, to be labeled Little Africa.
Because Greenwich Village,
Right, Greenwich.
That's the way-
Right, that's
Right.
When
you
I was
referred to-
talking
yeah.
that
about
Thompson
Greenwich
Street,
Village, yes.
Yeah.
that area.
And I didn't know until you referred to it in your book that Harlem was, but it didn't surprise
It
me.
wasn't all Harlem, it's
I
those
think,
three
on
blocks.
Staten Island we had,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
those
was kind
three
of a
blocks.
generic. Yeah. Let me ask, were there, for either of you, did you find any shared personal qualities that you had with your protagonists that you were able to draw upon in doing your research that kind of made you a natural to be writing about Peyton or Yuki about Thea?
Probably a lot because that's why I could write her. It's sort of like sort of going back to my own childhood and curiosity. I mean, the thing is that she lives in the most impoverished neighborhood of New York, and she's hungry often. But the book is not about being sad or hungry. I mean, it happens sometimes, but it's about her finding adventure in her life. She's 7 years old till 13. She was about 8.5 when I read that piece. And so for her, this is life, and it's just all an adventure in both her families. And so it's sort of about,
You can
just
empathize
somebody.
with the family security, no matter what the income is.
Yeah, and the adventure of being in New York City, and there's always an adventure, So yeah.
I mean, for me, so I'm not as bold as Philip Peyton is, but I am determined because I wanted to write this book for like 30 years. But also, there are a lot of places where my life crossed with Philip Peyton. So the block where he lived, I was director of real estate development at the Abyssinia Development Corporation. So I have an MBA in real estate finance, so I'm very interested in that. But on that block, that's the major block where Abyssinian was doing a lot of its initial developments in the 80s and 90s when I was working with them. So I know that block very well. I knew his house. I met the person who owned his building. It was a black man, Robert Pugh, and I talk about this in the epilogue of the book, who bought that house, understood Peyton's history, wanted to renovate it, and this is in the 90s when I was connected with this, so I always felt there's some connection calling me to do this.
And this was part of your academic ensconcement at the time, so you're...
Well, it was really part of my real estate development ensconcement, but my hobby was history, and so those things were coming together, and so now it's kind of flipped. So now history is my profession, but real estate, like if I didn't understand real estate finance and that, it would be a very different book, because even understanding the real estate records, I know that because I use them from that side, and a lot of people don't because they are confusing, but they are a treasure trove, understanding who owned what they paid for it, what were the terms, all of that.
Who was sold to,
yeah,
who bought.
Or it opens, just kind of fills in gaps that were there because there were no papers.
Is anyone else waiting to ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hi, this question is for Kia. I was wondering if you've seen Paradise Square, and also what was it that started this book and this journey and the characters, and did something? So just sort of talk about the genesis of it.
Yes, I actually did see Paradise Square, and I actually was on a panel at the Irish consulate with Larry Kerwin, who's the creator of that show. But separately, I mean, it was very separate. I didn't know him until very recently. Yeah, I was really interested in 5 Points, that community. I was interested in the draft riots and all that history. And all that happens, and it is all in the book, but and what I've talked about in terms of competition with jobs and things like that, but more than anything else, it was really about the poorest people coming together as a community. It is much more about that, I think, than about the tensions and how. And when I decided to address this, that's why I decided that I wanted the main character to be of both Black and Irish heritage. And I didn't realize until after it was published that it was a subconscious choice. But I think the reason I started with her at 7 is because she's still innocent. She doesn't have those judgments. And as she gets older and sees how the world is, she's seeing things differently. She's seeing sides being taken, but it starts out with somebody who's very pure of heart, and yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with the first question when we talk about finances. The fact that they were all so utterly poor, I think, had a lot to do with why they were so utterly connected as a community.
I think that's a good question to kind of start wrapping up with. We've got about 2 minutes. The success, and for people who don't know, Paradise Square just won a couple of major awards at the Tonys less than a week ago, and it covers, it's about a bygone period of Manhattan history, Black Manhattan history, and Irish history. But the fact that there's interest in that because it's winning awards and people are going to buying tickets to see it, how does that speak to you in terms of the lessons that come from these old stories? It's fascinating for all of us to discover these forgotten villes and pockets and corners of the city. But is it more than a novelty, or are there really solid lessons? What do we have to learn from?
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry.
Examples of-
Yeah, I'm sorry till Eric said that. I didn't explain what Paradise Square was. It's a play on Broadway, and it's the same period and the same community, 5 Points, Black and Irish, leading into the draft riots. Yeah, you know what? I feel that it's a shame that people, like everybody, I feel like, I mean, I've lived in New York a long time, but I didn't grow up in New York, but
everybody, I feel like should know that part of New York history. Just they should know this New York part of New York history. And so I'm very glad these stories are coming out. I'm only kind of shocked that I had to write it and it wasn't before, or that it's only now. It seems like everybody should know, so. Yeah, and I'm embarrassed that I don't know, but now I can get your book so that I know your history too.
And I would, add to that Harlem's history is complex, and not exactly what the dominant narrative talks about, and that's what I've been trying to tell with my books. And Philip Payton was complex too, and that's what that book talks about. He's not all hero. He's not a villain. But he's human.
Right, he's human.
Yeah, and that's what I really wanted to show and understand.
Peyton is interesting. I mean, he's so influential as, he paves the way for what we know as the Harlem Renaissance, the Great Migration, the Jazz Age, things that we associate with Black Harlem.
But he didn't.
But which he himself essentially missed because he dies in 1917.
Right.
So, well, if you had the opportunity to speak to him today, what would you ask?
So he achieved one goal in terms of a Black Harlem. That second goal is what really kind of motivated me for the book, because his goal was to eradicate residential segregation, and what he really did was reinforce it.
This has been great. We're going to sign some books just outside in the lobby. Thank you all for coming. Thank our authors, Thea Carthren, Kevin Magruder.